Are you covering for Prince Andrew? How long have you known about Andrew? How long? Hey, why are you covering? Why are you covering for him?
How long have you known about Andrew and Epstein?
The moment those voices cut through the air, sharp, relentless, impossible to ignore, you can feel the shift. This isn't the usual polite, choreographed royal engagement. This is something else entirely. Are you covering for Prince Andrew? How long have you known about Andrew? How long? Why are you covering? Why are you covering for him? How long have you known about Andrew Epstein? Those words don't just hang there, they land. Heavy, accusatory, demanding something the royal family has spent years avoiding. A direct answer. And what makes this moment so powerful isn't just the questions themselves, it's the silence that follows. Because silence in this context is not neutral. Silence is strategy. For decades, the monarchy has operated on a simple, deeply ingrained principle. Never complain, never explain. It's a phrase that has guided generations, from Queen Elizabeth II to the current reign of King Charles III. But what happens when that strategy meets a public that is no longer willing to accept it? What happens when the questions don't stop? Because they aren't stopping. They are a disgrace. Say nothing, they will get bored and go away. That's their mantra. That sentiment, whether whispered or shouted, reflects a growing frustration. A belief that the institution is not just avoiding accountability, but relying on time, distraction, and public fatigue to outlast controversy. But this time feels different, because this isn't just about Prince Andrew. This is about the institution itself. It's about what people believe the monarchy knew and when. And at the centre of it all is one name that refuses to fade: Jeffrey Epstein. The connection between Prince Andrew and Epstein has been public knowledge for years. The infamous interview with BBC Newsnight didn't just fail to clear Andrew's name, it intensified scrutiny. His explanations raised more questions than answers, and the fallout was swift. Titles were stripped, public duties were removed. The royal family attempted to draw a line under the scandal. Title stripping was the easy part, because removing titles doesn't erase questions. It doesn't address the deeper issue. What did others within the institution know? And that's where the focus shifts to King Charles. Now, to be clear, there has been no public evidence presented that King Charles had knowledge of Andrew's association with Epstein beyond what was already known. But in the court of public opinion, perception often matters as much as proof. And perception right now is shaped by moments like this, moments where the public confronts the monarchy directly, demanding clarity. Keep heckling, it's what they deserve. That line speaks to a growing willingness to challenge royal figures in real time. Not through carefully worded opinion pieces or distant commentary, but face to face in spaces that were once tightly controlled. It signals a breakdown of the traditional barrier between the monarchy and the public. Because there was a time not that long ago when such outbursts would have been unthinkable. Royal engagements were respectful, even reverent. Questions, if asked at all, were polite and contained. But today's public is different, more informed, more sceptical, less willing to accept deference without accountability. And the monarchy, as an institution, is struggling to adapt to that shift, because its greatest strength, its mystique, its distance, its refusal to engage in controversy is now being reframed as its greatest weakness. Silence is no longer seen as dignified. It's seen as evasive. And that creates a dilemma for King Charles, because every time he chooses not to respond, the questions grow louder. The speculation deepens. The narrative fills the void left by the lack of answers. What did you know? It's a simple question, but it carries enormous weight, because it's not just about knowledge, it's about responsibility. The monarchy is not just a family, it's an institution funded in part by the public. It represents continuity, stability, and, ideally, moral authority. So, when a scandal of this magnitude touches one of its senior members, the expectation isn't just internal accountability, it's public transparency. And that's where the tension lies, because transparency runs counter to centuries of royal tradition. The royal family has never been an institution that explains itself in detail. It reveals selectively, carefully, and often only when absolutely necessary. But in the digital age, where information spreads instantly and narratives are shaped in real time, that approach is increasingly difficult to maintain. The public doesn't wait anymore. They demand, they question, they confront. And when those demands aren't met, they don't simply disappear. They will get bored and go away. That may have worked in the past, but today attention doesn't fade. It shifts, evolves, and often intensifies. Especially when new generations are engaging with these issues, bringing fresh perspectives and fewer attachments to tradition. For many, this isn't about preserving the monarchy's image. It's about holding power to account. And that's a fundamental shift, because historically the monarchy has existed above that kind of scrutiny. Not entirely immune to criticism, but certainly insulated from the kind of direct, persistent questioning we're seeing now. And that insulation is eroding. The question now is whether the institution can adapt quickly enough to maintain its relevance. Because relevance in the modern era isn't just about ceremony and symbolism. It's about trust. And trust is built on transparency. Without it, every unanswered question becomes a crack in the foundation. Every moment of silence becomes an invitation for doubt. And every public confrontation, like the one we're seeing here, becomes a symbol of something larger, a shift in power, a shift in expectations, a shift in what the public is willing to accept. King Charles has already taken steps to modernize the monarchy in certain ways, streamlining roles, emphasizing a slimmed-down institution, focusing on efficiency and public service. But modernization isn't just structural, it's cultural. It requires a willingness to engage with the public in new ways, to acknowledge concerns even when they're uncomfortable, to provide clarity even when it's difficult. Because the alternative is what we're witnessing now, a growing disconnect between the institution and the people it serves. And that disconnect doesn't resolve itself. It widens, unless something changes. The challenge for King Charles is navigating this moment without undermining the very principles that define the monarchy. Because once you start answering questions, where do you stop? Once you break the silence, how do you maintain control of the narrative? It's a delicate balance, but it's also an unavoidable one. Because the questions aren't going away. Why are you covering for him? That accusation, whether fair or not, reflects a perception that the institution prioritizes protection over accountability. And perception, again, is everything. Even if there is no covering up, the absence of clear, direct communication can make it appear otherwise. And in the age of public scrutiny, appearances matter, perhaps more than ever before. So, what does accountability look like for a monarchy? It's not as straightforward as it is for elected officials or corporate leaders. There are no press conferences where the king fields questions, no formal mechanisms for public interrogation. But that doesn't mean there are no expectations, because the public ultimately holds the power of perception, and perception shapes legitimacy. If people begin to feel that the institution is out of touch, unresponsive, or unwilling to confront difficult truths, that legitimacy can erode, slowly at first, then all at once. And moments like this raw, unfiltered, confrontational accelerate that process. They bring underlying tensions to the surface. They force conversations that might otherwise remain buried. They challenge the status quo. And they demand a response. Whether that response comes or not will define this chapter of the monarchy. Because history doesn't just remember what was done, it remembers what was said and what wasn't. So the question remains, not just for King Charles, but for the institution as a whole. What did you know? And perhaps more importantly, what are you going to say about it now?